What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Jacked Ramsays live show. It's a Mail Bag-a-palooza. Danny Marang, Brandon Sprague coming at you. It's been a busy week here in Portland. Uncle Phil Knight, has made an official bid for the Portland Trailblazers. Mike Schmitz was hired. Sergio Oliva was hired as an assistant GM. OG Anunoby was caught in rumors. Dyson Daniels and Ben Mathurin have come in for workouts, and we've got a pile of mailbag questions. It's been a while since we did a mailbag, so I'm trying to grab as many as I can while addressing all the news. We talked about maybe doing a live show for Uncle Phil's bid, but after 2 live shows in a row, we were not going to do a third live show in a row during the off season. And we knew we had a mailbag coming, so want to kind of get there and wrap it in. Before we bring in Senor Sprague, if you're here for the first time, you're a long time, first time, whatever in between, like, rate, review, help us grow the show. It's free. It's easy. If you want to do us a solid, Apple Podcasts, leave us a review, 5-star, 1-star, whatever you feel like. You love us, you hate us, as long as you consume the content, ladies and gentlemen. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, Senor Sprague. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I'll take the hit here. This was my fault. The day that Uncle Phil made the offer, the news broke, caught everybody off guard.
You were nowhere to be found.
I was nowhere to be found. And the minute I read it, honest to God, my first thought was, shit, I can't do a live show today. I can't do it. It's the worst possible day Phil could have done this. So sorry we didn't go live that day, but we will break down everything. We got a million questions, and there's a lot to discuss. This franchise, I've said over and over again, they never can have nice things, but man, they're never not interesting. They're always interesting. There's always something to talk about with this franchise.
Yeah, I mean, they have been in the the news realm.
Yeah.
More in the past 2 weeks than maybe ever in their off season.
Do you like that? I was going to ask you that today on the pod and obviously that's a Joe Neal, I think, difference here.
Between
some of this is also
sure.
agency talk, but do you like it? Some people like the whole, you never leak what you're doing, and then boom, there it is. Portland makes a trade, or Portland signs this guy, versus, hey, Portland's one of the top 2 teams. Hey, Portland's eyeing this dude. Hey, Portland's in talks with. Hey, Portland's going to trade this pick.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get that. I'm trying not to play revisionist history here, so correct me if I'm wrong. I remember watching the Zach draft, and the fact that they traded up with the 2 picks to get 10 to get Zach, I remember thinking that was a bit of a surprise. Like, whoa, okay, they're in top 10 now, and Zach Collins, like, okay. I feel like we've already heard more about what they're going to potentially do with that pick than we've ever heard in any one draft or any one year in Neal's era.
100%. And I think this is the changing the guard, not only with Joe and how he wants to run things. We're no longer seeing things filtered through Woj. Even if Woj is getting stuff, I'll touch on this now, and then we'll kind of get forward as we talk about some of the player stuff. Woj is not a guy who is friendly with Clutch, and Portland is mostly Clutch now. Kind of running through things. Well, Chauncey is Clutch, obviously, and Yusuf Nurkic is Clutch, and a lot of the people they're pursuing in this offseason are Clutch. I've been told that Joe is not actually represented by Clutch, but they had a representative of Clutch negotiating his deal. That's not uncommon. There are a few coaches in the league who aren't represented by anybody, but they take one of the executive agents and have them negotiate stuff on retainer. But it's a different kind of publicity now. It's not all hiding behind the Iron Curtain of Soviet Russia as the Blazers ran things. It's much more, I don't want to say out in the open, because that's not true either. But they are not pretending like they're running a nuclear missile silo where state secrets are going to get things sideways. In fact, they hired a guy in Mike Schmitz so they could get information on draft prospects coming forward. And let's be honest here, Schmitz also, by them hiring Schmitz, they now have the ability to take that away from other people. So I think that's kind of an interesting kind of a dichotomy of where things are sitting at. But let's kind of roll back here, Brandon, to but to answer your question, I'm all for it. I like the way that they're handling
You like
things
it, okay.
and publicly. Where do you sit?
I like it. I like hearing about what the team's kind of doing. We don't, this is a small market, so they're able to get away with some stuff that other people in other markets don't necessarily.
This is not working in Philadelphia.
No, and I will stand up for the media. I'm not friends with everybody in the media, but what I will say is I don't like the whole like blame the media for the lack of availability or the lack of interviews and exposure and all that stuff. I honestly just think it's a team that views itself as the one horse team in the town, and they do what they want, when they want, how they want. And so I'd love to talk to Joe. I know whether on this podcast with you, which I think would be fantastic, or the radio show or whatever, I'd love to hear from Joe, but we don't get that. And we obviously never got that with the last guy. Yeah. So
I don't think Neil made a single radio. No, it's not true. He did make it one with Dwight.
I was going to say, if it was anything, it was going to be on the home of the Blazers, and it was probably going to be a one-off. That said, yes, a long way of answering it. I like it just because, I don't buy every single rumor or that they're going to get everything in the rumor. But, man, it's the closest we get to hearing any idea of what the plan is. We never got that unless it was 2 press conferences a year. Yeah,
and that's where I think it's an interesting thing. Let's go a little bit further up the ladder. And obviously the big news that came out of nowhere. You and I have talked about ownership and transition for the better part of a year. A lot of what has been discussed and what was out there, or is out there, is stuff that we've talked about here on the show really for the past year. The new part of this and the massive part of this is Phil Knight being involved. And you've been in this media landscape a long time, and you've heard the same things that I have heard for a decade or longer. And that's Phil Knight was never going to be involved in professional ownership. That was every league had approached him, and it was an unabashed no.
Yep.
So when that news dropped, what was your reaction when your boss Jeff sent you the Woj tweet? When you got that, what was your initial reaction?
First of all, he didn't even send me what the bomb was. My boss texted me, was like, Woj bomb. Maybe we should post to Facebook. And I was in the middle of doing something like, shit. Open it up. It's maybe the biggest news we've had in a while. My first reaction really was, I think like a lot of other people's, wow. Because it's not for lack of money. It's not for lack of anything outside of just not having an interest. Like, this guy viewed, I think, ownership in the light of Oregon. Some, and it's a sliver, but some Duck fan gets mad about this, like as if it's something to be ashamed of, that you have basically an owner of your program, that without that guy, that program is probably Oregon State.
Yes.
It's great to have that. I wish Oregon State had that. I wish every small market
It's certainly a jealousy, like.
Absolutely.
Like, part of the reason USC is the program they are is because they have some of the most incredible
Deep
Hollywood
pockets.
donors you could imagine.
Yes, Will Ferrell and Snoop Dogg show up to your practices.
And those aren't even the biggest names that are like behind the scenes. No. Not even close.
The biggest names are the ones you've never heard of.
Yes.
You're like, oh, you're a billionaire. I've never heard of you. That's cool. So it was wow was the initial reaction. Second thing, I wonder why now. What was it about now? He's 84. For all we know, he's got $30 billion plus. This dude could live to be 9,000 years old. He could become a robot. Like, we don't know what his future holds. I don't know what the future holds for humanity. So I'm curious why
Philbot 2000.
Philbot 2000. Why at the age of 84? What was it about this team now? I know Paul had a stranglehold of ownership going back to the late 80s. I get that. But, man, there was no indication you had any real want to do this. So I'm really curious. Why now? How much of that was Smolinisky and their relationship and him saying, dude, I want to own a team. It's going great in LA. You got a great thing in Portland. Let's run on that.
It's fun to win.
It's fun to win. You're never winning a championship in college football. Pack it in. Your best bet to win a title is in the NBA. Let's do it, Uncle Phil. I'd really just love to know that. That's my biggest question and one I still have. Why now at the age of 84 does Phil Knight think, oh, I want to own a pro sports team?
I'm going to speculate.
Great. That's what the podcast is for.
I genuinely believe. So I'm sure you've heard the same things because you're obviously in the college football section of things much more frequently than I am. I pay attention to the money behind things significantly on the college football side. Let's just say how it is. Phil did anything and everything and was the bag man for not just Oregon football but all of Oregon sports.
Oregon University, really. I mean, everything. He built non-sports facilities, too.
But, I mean, as far as the sports side of things, he got so jealous of Oregon State's baseball run that he created his own team.
Yes, he did.
Like, he was sitting there watching his rival university dominate the country. He was like, What do you need? 20 million? 50 million?
Right.
Like their team came out of nowhere, absolutely nowhere, and they became a competitive team almost immediately. And like that's the kind of thing where you're like, holy. And I think what Phil is doing here, because he has accomplished so much in life, and potentially where NIL is putting things, and how many schools, like if all of a sudden a T. Boone Pickens comes out of nowhere for another university, you could see a school just like all of a sudden be in a title chase because they buy a quarterback, they buy a DB, they buy a linebacker, they buy a wide receiver. Like Ryan Day at Ohio State said basically it's going to cost him $13 million a year in NIL money to bring in his quarterback, to bring in his top tackle, to bring in his running back. And I would venture a guess at the top programs, the Ohio State's, USC's, Alabama's, that it's going to be closer to 20 going forward. That changes a landscape. And it's not that Phil doesn't have the money, but it changes things significantly. So depending on how you were running your bag man, how efficiently you were doing it, and how well you were able to pull those guys in, I don't think that the landscape is as favorable as it was, because now it's out in the open. So any advantages you may have had behind the scenes, those are gone. And for Phil, buying, keeping, and investing in the Trailblazers is a way to double down on his legacy. Not just University of Oregon sports, but tying himself to the Blazers, even if they don't win a title.
Right.
But being a part of that, and like, again, when you're worth $50-60 billion, because I think his liquid assets is something like close to like 20. I think he's got, as far as I understand it, he's got dumb cash reserves type deals. Mm-hmm. This isn't a Tillman Fertitta thing where it's like theoretical money.
No. This is real FU money. Like this is, he will never spend this money.
No, I think he's still in the top 25 richest in the world. So as far as like liquid assets, which is insane to think about. The idea of like what he could do, it fuels his legacy. And I think from a fan standpoint, you should be thrilled because this guy is as cutthroat as it gets. I tweeted out, Phil Knight is the kind of guy who would sell his soul to get his beloved Ducks a national title. And that's exactly, and we've talked about this, right, Brandon? Like what kind of owner we want post Jody Allen. Yeah. I want somebody who this is what they do.
Yes.
This is what Phil Knight is going to do.
I love the legacy play idea. I think it's a pretty good one. He's 84, so maybe that's where this kind of comes into play of, he's got the PK80 event coming back this coming season.
PK85.
PK85, and it's got women's teams, it's got men's teams. It's going
to be the biggest the Maui Invitational is probably the biggest early season tournament in the NCAA. This might surpass that this year.
Oh, it's not a might. When you bring the top women's teams and you have the top men's teams, there's no other tournament like this. So he is already going to take over that mantle. We know what he's done at Oregon. Obviously, Nike's the giant that they are. He's not on the day-to-day stuff. So I like the legacy play idea that you're going with. And I don't disagree with you whatsoever. We don't know all the details yet. Again, we'll get to the bidding process and how that became public. But I think the thing with Phil that I like is just the idea that there's not a scenario where if this team ends up hitting with the right mix of talent, he's going, luxury tax, got to get out of this. He's going to take, I assume, we're assuming this, but my gut reaction would be he's taking the Golden State and the Lacob idea, right?
Spend.
Spend the damn money. You want to compete. You want to win championships. You want to be legit in this league. You got to spend money. And that doesn't mean paying the luxury tax for a one-and-done exit team, but it's identifying what kind of talent you can bring in and how you can kind of map this thing out going forward. So I think the aggressive part, agree 100%. Legacy play, maybe that's what it is. He's 84. He's looking in the mirror. He's like, I can add one more thing to my legacy, which is a pretty damn good legacy already. But this is another element to it of local guy who has built hospitals, done cancer research, built up a university sports program.
He's got equity.
And I know some people, I don't want to dive into this, but I know some people immediately go, and he saved him and kept him in our city and didn't let him relocate. Folks, the NBA is not mother bleeping turning down $3 mother bleeping billion freaking dollars for an expansion opportunity in Seattle where they owe him one, just so Portland can relocate. It was never really a thing. And so I think this is more about, hey, Phil Knight, Nike, cancer research, University of Oregon, Blazers.
Yeah, it's I think you pretty much locked it up. Kirk says, my only problem with Phil Knight is he'll be worshipped from Oregon sports fans, no accountability. I would go completely the other
Say that
direction.
one more time.
He says, my only problem with Phil Knight is he'll be worshipped from Oregon sports fans with no accountability. As in that Phil Knight wouldn't be accountable because of the influence that he has already had. And I'm going completely the other way because this guy is maniacal about his commitment.
Yeah.
There's nobody has ever said, Phil Knight's not dedicated. I mean, he is cutthroat. He is absolutely cutthroat in everything that he does.
Yeah.
And that's what I want. Like, I want the guy, and we've joked about this while also being dead serious. I want the guy that's going to tamper. I want the guy that's going to push the envelope. I want the guy that's going to be okay taking a $500,000 fine because they stretched. Like, that's what I want. And if you think a guy late this far down in his life that has accomplished as much as he has, if you think he's going to sit back, he's going to Steve Ballmer this thing. There's going to be a deal in there somewhere. There was a couple of Lakers guys. I quote tweeted it with something along the lines of like, "Oh, now it's a problem that that they're finding ways to work outside the CBA because it's not LA." Like, think about this: going to LA, part of the way that players are able to recoup money is endorsements. If you think that the Lakers aren't lining those up for these players, you are out of your bleeping mind.
Yeah.
Now, all of a sudden, the Blazers, if they get a Phil Knight ownership group, do you think maybe there might be a golden goose-led path to the swoosh? Absolutely. Absolutely, and I hope they do.
Yeah.
I want them to just work every single freaking angle that they have to get that done because I want them to have an advantage because they've been behind the eight ball through most of their existence because they've got prohibitive tax laws. They're in a geographical isolated area. They're in a predominantly white market. Now you've got the face of professional sports for the last 40 years. Leverage the hell out of it. Think about this. University of Oregon, do they have new investment in everything every single year in basically every sport? Are they innovating at all times? Do they just dump a truckload of money so that they can recruit at a level outside of the NIL stuff, their facilities? Is it some of the best on the planet?
Danny, they import bamboo from Thailand so they can build a goddamn coffee table in their football building. Like, when you're going to that kind of detail, hey, what does this coffee table that's a 4x2 and on our third floor of our 7th floor building, what should be made of? Let's do bamboo from a forest in Thailand. Let's ship it over.
It was crapped out by an endangered panda.
Like, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. When you're going to those lengths for detail, yes, you are doing any and everything. Oh, let's build up Autzen. Oh, let's build a new basketball stadium. Let's
the track and field stadium.
A world-class
Olympic, one of the best facilities in the freaking world.
Educational buildings on campus, jerseys galore. Like, when you're doing that. Yeah. Now, I will say, I'm not a Duck fan.
Neither of us are.
But I've also, I've wondered aloud some things with him and the way that he is a booster and the way that they spend the money that I always find interesting. As a non-Duck fan who, if I was a Duck fan, these are things I'd be wondering. You mentioned the NIL thing. You're walking me through $20 million, $13 million a year. Okay. What is that? What is that to a guy who wants to see his team win a championship before he's gone?
Nothing.
That's nothing. He spends a lot of money on buildings, facilities, the right, beautiful things. He can't outbid coaches from leaving their programs. And I know some of these are hometown, go back home things, but if you're offering Mario $10 million a year, and maybe he doesn't think he's worth it,
and that's where I was going to go. Is I don't know if he's believed truly in any of those guys being.
That's fine. Maybe it's a program is bigger than this guy thing, and that's cool. But Tennessee, and you can laugh at Tennessee if this kid's a bust. Nico, that quarterback, $8 million. These are things they could easily have, and it's we got a new building though, and it's well, is that the right? Okay, we'll see if that ends up working out for him. So those are just little areas I would always wonder as a Duck fan. And I don't know if that's ever going to rear its ugly head because it's a different business. It's a different way of doing things.
I think it's a good problem to have.
But it's a good problem to have of hey, how are you spending all of that money that you're spending?
Jeremy says, what's the point of having FU money if you can't say FU? That's ultimately. I don't see a world where a better ownership group exists.
What about Ellison?
Just as old.
Sure, but you said a group as good. But
he doesn't have the swoosh behind
Oregon,
him.
the swoosh, yeah.
Like that's, I think Ellison. Like the big thing that I wanted is number one, FU money. I want more money than God. Like I don't ever want money to be an issue. And with those two guys, you have two of the top 20, 25 richest people on the planet. Like you do not have to worry about money in any way, shape, matter, or form. And I think with Knight, you get a level of commitment that's maniacal. And it's something hyper focused. And I've already seen people, what happens, if Phil Knight passes away? Phil Knight is not unprepared. I guarantee from the minute that contract is signed and they become owners, there is a succession plan in place. 100%.
Also, he's not going to die. He's going to be a robot. I'm telling you guys. Like, it's going to be a swoosh robot. It's going to be unbelievable.
It's going to go full on Futurama.
Think Stormtrooper with a swoosh on his chest.
It'll have diamond plate on the shoulders, too.
He's even going to walk around with a laser blaster and be like, where'd you get that weapon? I didn't think those existed. Well, I'm Phil Knight. Everything exists.
I've already seen a few people like, well, is it going to be a problem between Damian Lillard and Phil Knight? No. Because one's Adidas and one's Nike. No, it's not going to be a problem. That
stuff is so far past ever being a problem in this league.
I wonder if it's going to be that the gif of them staring back and forth. What is it? Diddy and who's the other guy in that gif where they're staring back and forth at each other?
I saw this. Yeah. It was like
I can imagine it. I can imagine them being like,
when
they first walk into the room.
Somebody hit me, was like, how much of this is Phil going to go after Dame because his contract, I guess, is up with Adidas, and I'm like, I mean, he might, but is he going to give Dame $250 million or more? Because like Dame's getting real FU money from Adidas.
Dame's
9 figures.
9 figures. Thank you.
He's a 9 figures.
He's a 9-figure deal for Adidas. I think he has the largest non-soccer deal in the world for Adidas.
And Nike is basically like, outside of LeBron and Giannis, we're really not all in on certain guys. No. You know what I mean?
No, they've actually kind of stepped back from that stuff a little bit.
They're cutting Kyrie reportedly.
Well, I mean, that makes sense.
No, I'm just saying, like, they're already, like, they got rid of Kobe for a minute. I mean,
yeah, they figured that one out, though. Jake says he called it a swoosh trooper.
A swoosh trooper. Yeah, I like
that. That tracks.
That does track.
And we should mention Alan Smolinisky, who is also the co-bidder along with Phil Knight, who's half of Phil Knight's age. 84 for Phil Knight, 42 for Smolinisky. For those that don't know, he is a USC Fight On graduate, and he made his money in real estate development around USC with student housing. He was so good at it, in fact, he got sued by USC for monopolizing the housing market. The other part of this is, so we have the competitive basketball side of things. The other side of this is now, if you get a real estate development guy who specializes in turning properties over and making them better and more usable, how about making the Rose Quarter better and more usable?
I mean, where do you start on that?
But it's what I mean. Like, if you're going to have an ownership group, having somebody who specializes in the basketball side and another guy who specializes in the real estate side.
Yeah.
And then you throw in Kirk Brown, another billionaire who's going to be backing this and getting a WNBA team.
That's for sure happening, by the way. That was I know a lot of people pointed it out on Twitter, but I was not on. I read the Jennings piece on The Athletic about that. And
Chantel Jennings, for those who don't know.
Chantel Jennings, yeah, she did a good piece on the WNBA expansion stuff, and Portland's one of like the 7 cities. My first
they're one of one.
Well, right, but my first thought with Phil was, they're going to.
How much money have they invested in women's sports lately?
Right. I mean, they're cutting hockey to invest more in that kind of stuff. Women's sports, tennis specific. Like, they're cutting their partnership with the NHL in large because they're driving women's sports. And if you're doing that, I think you're also all in on the WNBA. Yeah.
And so you talk about, again, what it means, not just for the Trailblazers, it's the entire entity of that whole area. That because of the lease agreement that's currently about to go or about to finish up. And this would allow a real estate developer to kind of figure that stuff out and look at the development, putting in a LA Live type situation. And for those who don't know, Dwayne Hankins is currently the president of the business side of the operations. He quote tweeted, I believe, Chantel's piece or somebody who aggregated it. And when they asked, like, what city do you want to see it? He publicly said, Portland, please. Let me just tell you guys, Dwayne's not doing that without blessings.
Well, ultimately my dream is Phil gets the team. They get this team back to a respectability. And part of Renovating the Rose Quarter area is getting the city to not give a damn anymore, finally blow the glass palace out and build a football stadium and make that the Memorial Coliseum. Like, that's that's my dream scenario, pie in the sky sports fan in Portland thing. But we'll see how they
Whoever it is that owns the grain silos right there finally gives them up because Paul Allen tried to buy them for 20 years.
I've heard the dumbest. I had somebody pretty high up that I would really trust with this info that worked really closely with Paul. And
they tried to buy it over and over and over again.
They tried to buy it, but do you know what they wanted to do with it? So they told me that when Paul wanted to buy it, he wanted to turn those silos into apartments. He was going to go in there and piece together flooring and carve out windows all in those silos and make basically city view housing right next to it.
Interesting.
And I'm sure it's one of a few ideas, but that's somebody was working with him at the time. That's what they had told me.
I mean, that'd be pretty dope, especially if it was a baseball/football stadium that was right there that you looked into.
Oh, don't get me started.
I'm just
dare to dream.
If they literally just ripped out like 2 square miles of Broadway right there and just gutted it, redid everything for like, again, you have FU money in Phil Knight and a real estate developer. If they figured that out, like the stuff that they could do is incredible. I've seen a few people saying I'm half watching this game. So yes, the Golden State Warriors are.
Oh yeah, the finals are on. I mean, we got to watch them
in the third quarter over the Celtics. But let's get into some of these questions.
Yep.
Ryan Whitledge asks, at the Ryan Whitty, is the laughable statement from the team about not being for sale just to play for a higher bid, or is it legally the correct thing to do due to the complications brought on by being sold from the trust? What would you put the chance of Knight ownership actually happening? Where would you say, let's work our way backwards. What would you say the Knight ownership looks like percentage-wise?
Like where I'd put that it's going to happen?
The likelihood of it happening.
Oh, I'd put it at 89%. I'm leaving wiggle room. For
I was literally going to go at 90.
Yeah, I mean, like, hey, simpatico.
Yeah.
Here's my 2 cents. Could be wrong on this. I don't know why there'd be any legalities to why that team would need to respond at all to any public offer made. They don't have to respond to it, but I don't know why there'd be a legality stating they have to respond publicly the way they did to Woj.
Yes. Again, I would be at 90%. I don't think – because remember, the league owners have to approve the sale.
They want him in the league.
They want
Silver
Phil Knight
wants him in the league.
Yes,
come on, he's the jersey sponsor, for God's sakes.
And not only that, it's Phil Knight. You know the money. You know the I mean, this is –
it's good.
And I've seen a lot of people with the conflict of interest stuff, and they say, well, Michael Jordan has kind of divested himself from Jordan Brand as far as anything outside of royalties, is what I was told, much like Phil Knight has from Nike. But again, let's be honest, they're both in charge. If they want something done, it's happening.
Well, there's a GD logo on the Hornets jersey.
Yes.
It's the Jordan,
and that's
logo.
Their normal jersey is the Jordan Brand. Let's be honest.
Right.
But the one I always point out that people otherwise don't, Michael Rubin, who owns the Philadelphia 76ers, he started and owns Fanatics. They are the official jersey, apparel, everything supplier for basically every sport. They are the official wholesaler. Qualtrics, who
you see their commercials all the time during NBA games.
Yes,
Fanatics, yeah,
because they're the official supplier,
right.
And they're making millions upon millions of dollars. Qualtrics, who the owner of the Jazz, he's the founder and owner of. That's the system that they use to keep track of all of the COVID tracing. Like there's conflict. Basically, what I'm saying is there's conflict of interest everywhere. That stuff, it doesn't matter anymore. And not only that, Phil Knight, because he's been kind of divested from Nike at least enough, can at least be legally arm's length away. Yeah. The other part of this, as far as the team saying the team's not for sale, well, Adam Silver came out like 2 hours later and said, yeah, they are.
They have to sell.
They have to sell. And I think that was a definitely a double bird.
Yes.
At the Trailblazers and the Vulcans. Like, you can sit here and say this all you want, but you have to sell. And everybody knows you have to sell.
I love that he didn't really compliment her. I think he basically said, she's been a fine steward of the team. Like, she's not existed to us, okay? Yeah. She's not existed to people in Portland.
Because what's crazy about this is for those that don't know, Paul Allen was the owner in the NBA. He sat at the top of the table. If you're talking Game of Thrones, that's his chair. He was one of the longest-lasting owners in the league. He had more influence than any other owner in the league by a substantial margin. By not only his money, but his time and position and his voice. Like he was the guy that first kind of ushered in regional TV deals. Yeah. He was the guy that tried to do internet streaming. Remember BlazerVision?
BlazerVision.
This was
what
15 years ago. Like, they was so far ahead of his time as far as, like, stuff that they wanted to do. And, like, for the Blazers to go from where they were, their seat at the table, they went from the big chair all the way to the kiddie table with Jody Allen because of the stewardship. Phil Knight, he may not be an owner as far as, like, longevity, but he's got a knife behind his back. That's a guy killing to get to the top of the table. That's not a guy that stands by idly. That's a guy who walks into a room and immediately wins.
Well, I think the beauty of this could be, you know, we don't know what the future of the Ducks is going to be. I think it's going to be so hard for a program from any Pac-12 position, let alone Oregon, to go and beat the SEC juggernauts. Mm-hmm. This is a man absolutely driven by being at the top. Now, he's got the top in track and field, and his basketball teams at the university are really good. Mm-hmm. But, you know, there's a bit of a level here. College football is at the top. The NBA,
there's only 30.
It could rival, and this is a genuine club of clubs. And to be able to try to get to the top of that and create your own kind of Golden State, I think that's an exciting thing for somebody that's 84 years young.
Yeah, I'm excited about this, but I will say this: John Canzano has had a lot of great reporting over the last couple of weeks about the potential sale. What he has reported is a lot of the exact same things you and I have talked about behind the scenes, really, for the last 6 months. He's just been able to actually report it because it's not what we do here. But I think the very interesting thing out of this was Woj said an offer that was over $2 billion. I have heard, and I cannot confirm, that the offer was somewhere in the neighborhood of 2.2.
I was kind of wondering if it was 2.2, 2.3. Yeah. I feel like when you say just over 2, you're not quite getting to 3. You're at like that 2 to 1 situation, and they're looking for more than that, which is like, okay, good luck.
They want 3, which is almost double what the Timberwolves sold for.
You're not doing that.
Now, do the Blazers and Burkhold and the Vulcans say we're going to take this to auction? I think the league is going to kind of step in, and if it's not Phil Knight, and say, we need you to sell to Phil. But as long as the number gets to a certain point. If they want to say, I think ultimately this gets done when it hits 2.5.
See, I think they're haggling publicly over $150 million. I think if this thing gets to 2, 3.5, 2, 4, I think it's good.
And that's why I put it at 2.5. I think if it gets to 2.5, it's done. Absolutely done.
I wish I had that kind of cash, man. It would be so amazing.
I wish I had 10% of it.
If
1%.
I had, I know they're about saving money, and you don't become rich by spending all your money. If I'm in that situation, I'm
buying a team. 100%.
Here's 2.8. Piss off. Give me the team. Goodbye. I'm becoming an NBA owner.
Because you can't spend it. When you have that much money, you can't spend it.
You can never spend it. He's always getting more money.
Yeah.
Like
his interest rate alone his stock options alone are worth.
Danny, I think they said Mackenzie Scott, when she got divorced from
$33 billion.
She got $33 billion. She spent like half instantly into charity. She made like $50 billion
through COVID.
From where she's tied to finance. Like, think about that. She had 30. She spent half. COVID hits, she makes 50.
She makes 150% more.
Like, and she's out here like shoveling it out, like, I gotta get it out of here.
She's Scrooge McDucking, swimming through it and just shooting it into a cannon, and still can't keep up.
Can't get rid of it fast.
Frank Robinson asks, what about a G League team? I would imagine if Phil Knight gets involved, day one a G League team is there. But not only that, and this is where Uncle Phil, the play money, comes like really matters. I would imagine that. I don't know if it's carte blanche, but I would imagine that your sports medical staff, your sports medicine staff, that's your training facility. Like the Blazers practice facility is fine. It's decent. Like, I was literally just there a couple hours ago. But there are certainly facilities that are in the NBA that are significantly nicer. And I would imagine that becomes a draw because it so
I think they just play at the Coliseum. I think he'd renovate it and they'd play at the Coliseum.
Ooh, but here's the interesting thing. A lot of players like the fact that the practice facility is in the suburbs because they all live there. And that's actually a big issue for those that go and play in New York. The Knicks practice facility is like an hour and a half drive from the arena. It's out in the sticks.
Is it out in Jersey? Or
it's like, again, it's like, and that's a long way to drive in New York. And so that's actually a significant issue for players and has been for a while. But I can imagine Phil Knight being like, oh, no, we're going to have a state-of-the-art facility. We're going to, they buy out what we used to be Club Sport. It's whatever it is now. It's right next door. And, they just got that whole parking lot, turned it to class.
Are you talking about that Villa Club Sport?
Yeah. Did
that shut down?
No, it got bought out, renamed as something else. But it's still a gym, but I can't remember what it got turned.
Sure.
What other brand, or whatever name it is. But I would imagine they would just buy that whole lot out and kind of turn that into a new practice facility.
I mean, getting a G League team would be pretty good considering I think we're one of two teams that don't have one. Only team now. That's cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So that was my thought is they renovate that and they do it like Santa Cruz did, and they have their practice facility slash G League team because that lot's big enough.
It's huge, and they got that. I think like right down the road is that like abandoned gas station that sign still stands with like the Texaco sign, but you can't see it anymore.
Yep.
Like they got a lot of land areas.
There's a ton of right there that they could work with, and I think with what they're doing in Bridgeport and all that.
Yeah, Golden State is house.
Yeah, they went nuts there.
Poole just hit like a half court shot.
But yeah, I think that all those areas on the margins that they could work through would be available. This from Justin Ross. I heard whispers of Blazers moving up to 3 by trading 7 and Simons. While I hate that idea, I assume they'd be high on Banchero, but that is me wondering if that was the route, how much traction does Levine to Portland gain? I will tell you right now without mincing words. Levine to Portland has 0 legs. It is legless. That's water carrying.
Chatta. It's just chatta.
Yeah. Not chowder. Chatta.
Which, by the way, I'm not that upset by.
No, carry some water.
I'd be in on Levine. Like I wouldn't be mad at it, but like
they're not doing that they're not dumping Anthony Simons to add Zach LaVine. Like
no, I don't. I also I love and Bobby Marks. Some people are giving him flack for he was put on the spot on a draft preview show.
Like what's something wild?
Yeah, he kind of went a little wild.
So he decided he'd go for gross overpay and go Anthony Simons and 7 for 3. It would not cost that much to move up that much.
Yeah, I would hope it wouldn't cost that much.
No. So, but the idea of the Blazers moving up, it's not out of this world. I've talked to more than a few people who don't be surprised if a player that you don't think ends up in the top 3. That player being Jaden Ivey.
Jaden Ivey seems to be catching a lot of steam.
I've heard a couple teams that have talked about moving up to 2 and 3 for him.
Wow.
So it's.
But I still have a hard time believing. I have a hard time believing Banchero falls outside of that top 3. I think if anything, it's going to be a Chet falls. That's my hottest take for the draft.
That's the hot one because I still think he's going number 1.
He definitely could. I still going to say Jabari goes 1. But I think if there's major movement, guys are moving up to go get a Jaden. I just think in some of these workouts, man, like you're working out Paolo and you're working out Chet. Chet's skilled, but aren't you physically looking at the two just going, I got to put everything on the line for this kid that weighs 106 pounds?
And that's always the question is how much you're willing to risk. And, I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks were manned by John Hammond, and they took a skinny kid from Greece named Giannis Antetokounmpo. Yep. And the rest is history. John Hammond, that same man, is now the general manager of the Orlando Magic, who have the number 1 overall pick. So that's if anybody's like, they wouldn't do that. Yeah, they would.
It'd be very Orlando to take that swing.
They took Giannis, they took Thon Maker. Like, yes, they would. They absolutely would, unabashedly. Let's get a little social here real quick. Was it yesterday? Day before. This is Friday afternoon. Yusuf Nurkic tweeted out in response to Trenton Watford saying, "Never knew finding a house in PDX would be this tough," with a face over the or a hand over the face emoji. And Nurk quote tweeted and said, "I might sell my house soon." And that got everybody going, huh?
Can I just interrupt real quick before we get into the Nurk stuff? Look, Watford, I get is not Damian Lillard. I just feel like when you're an NBA player, you have a market that's unto yourself, and you go, I'm an NBA player, and they go, okay, great, house sold.
He also got real money, too. He got a real contract.
I almost feel like they just tweet these things to tweet these things. Like, they're just bored, and they're like, man, I kind of need a new house. I haven't really looked. Looking for a house sucks. I'm going to tweet that. Finding a house in Portland's not easy.
Says the guy who can buy a real estate agent to literally handle every single part of it until he needs to come in and sign paperwork.
That's what I'm saying. Is like I got a friend that's been outbid now by like 7 of his last 8 houses, and I'm just like,
remember I told you, 24.
That's
24 before
hard.
I got my house.
No, I know it's not easy, and I think for guys like us, it's hard. I don't know if it's hard for NBA players.
I said all this is just kind of like Nurk's trolling. But Colin Pettit says, how confident are you that Nurk stays even if we don't get Ayton? Do you think we'd look to get more of a playoff type big over Nurk? If the Blazers don't land DeAndre Ayton or another big, Yusuf Nurkic will be a trailblazer. I do not think that the Blazers are going to put themselves in a position where they are scrambling for a starting caliber big by letting Yusuf Nurkic go.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a world where they're like, we're willing to risk it for the biscuit, baby?
No. I think it's swinging for a DeAndre type, and if you're not getting that, Yusuf Nurkic is your center.
So ultimately, I don't think it's a situation that's you really have to worry about in that regard. But the idea of Yusuf Nurkic being moved is something that can definitely be out there. Another question here. Bruce Caesar Bennett at C's25. What would it take to get Collins out of Atlanta? Would prefer him over Grant. We've spent a ton of time talking about OG, about DeAndre Ayton, and exhaustingly about Jerami Grant. We have not talked about John Collins enough, and this is the intel that I have on John Collins and the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks are in a position that the Portland Trailblazers were in 2019 when they doubled down and had no money, and they just said, screw it, we're going to give up draft picks for Robert Covington and then more for Larry Nance Jr., and they had guys locked up. And they just went so far down a hole that, well, when Joe Cronin decided to make some changes and they wanted to peel it back, that Band-Aid sucked when they tore it off because they just went too far. The Hawks are trying to tear the Band-Aid off before it gets real nasty. And part of that is clearing the books because they gave away too much money on the false Eastern Conference Finals. Walking and beating the New York Knicks, never a way that you should probably build around that. Much the same way the Blazers beat the very young Nuggets in Game 7, scraping by.
Yeah.
And now the opportunity is there for Atlanta to move off that money. And John Collins is the first one on there. Kevin Huerter is number 2 on that list. They are not moving DeAndre Hunter, and I have heard that John Collins absolutely unequivocally does not want to play with Trae Young anymore.
That relationship seemed to sour during the season, yeah.
And I've heard it would be a very welcome change for John Collins. So if the Hawks can find a way to get somebody basically to take John Collins and not take a bunch of long-term guaranteed money back, does this sound familiar?
Yeah, sounds like Portland. So Hawk fans are going to absolutely shit all over that trade and be like, well, great, we got way worse.
We got flexibility. What does that mean?
We got somebody who doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Or they're going to get a draft pick for 2025. Great, that guy's a high school freshman right now. And it's going to be like, well, I guess it's your problem now. All the crap that we heard.
Do you think it'd be that simple?
Yeah, I think the return for John Collins is not going to be that tremendous. As good a player as he is, I think some people...
They wouldn't want a Nurkic back. That would make no sense for him.
No, I think they want to get some youth, some assets, and some draft picks.
Are we talking potentially 2025 and Nas?
I would think something about that line.
Like something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what ultimately I think they'd have to attach something else in there. That would be Bledsoe to make the money work. But that gets them out of 4 years of John Collins and only 1 year of Eric Bledsoe. And as again, that becomes a piece that they can again flip at the trade deadline for another expiring contract, much the way the Trailblazers, if they re-sign Joe Ingles, would be looking to do at the trade deadline.
How would that let's go pie in the sky here real quick. Because I'd imagine other people have the same kind of thought. And I'm not going to pretend I'm not Mr. Salary cap guy, right? We leave that to you. If you got John Collins, so you got Collins, Nurkic is signing a new deal. You've got Dame's deal that you'd assume he's getting that extension. How does the financials work if they are pie in the sky going to go also get an OG on a newbie?
It's doable.
Okay.
It's doable. So the order of operations matters, and how you bring guys in and which. So you would use the number 7 overall pick and whatever else, whether it's Nas or Hart or however that shapes up. Either way, it's going to hurt. I think it's going to hurt. I love Nas like as a human being, as a player. I think the Blazers are gonna. If they do what they want to do, I think it's going to end up costing one of those guys.
Oh, so here's the other part of this. So if they go in financially and they're like right at that line, they're over. How much of the sale I think, plays a factor in this, right? If Phil and Smolinisky are the leading candidates, but it's going to take them about a year for everything to transition. How do the financial situations work out, you think, with the current ownership paired with the potential new ownership saying, we don't give a shit about that salary tax.
Yeah, just
that's the team.
Yeah.
Versus the Vulcans still being there saying, I don't know if we want to dive into that.
I don't think it really matters ultimately. I think they're kind of in that caretaker position, and they've kind of cut some money in some certain areas. Like they hired some cheaper assistants. They've the people that Joe Cronin has brought in Bo Smits and Oliva and Andre Patterson are all younger, first time elevated. Those positions are then cheaper. So those are things I think they've already kind of compensated for. The long term money going forward, I don't think is going to be a big issue when it's committed to outside of Damian Lillard, who's global icon, he's a money printing machine unto himself. I don't think anybody's going to bat an eye at $25 million for John Collins or $18 million for OG Anunoby or $20 million for Anthony Simons. I don't think anybody's going to care about that. But when you take a look at what the team could look like in this scenario, the idea of Dame, Ant, OG, John Collins, Yusuf Nurkic, is that a title-winning team? No, but you've got money in the right places. You've got more size. You've got a lot more variability in how you can attack things and how you can figure things out.
That's a pretty damn good lineup, man. Like, I'll bet I don't think it's a title winner, but like, let's not act like the West is stacked and loaded with these amazing teams that are going to dominate. Golden State's in the finals. It looks like they're going to win game 2, so we had a even series there. Outside of that, like, was Dallas's run a little fluky? I know Luka's great, but that roster's not loaded. Phoenix looks like an utter disaster. Utah today, we found out, sounds like they're going to completely have to blow this up and may even lose Donovan Mitchell in the process. The Memphis Grizzlies, I mean, sure, the baby Grizzlies, you're all in on that, but let's see. Let's not completely get over our skis. The Pelicans were barely a play-in team and should have lost had COVID not interrupted. We don't know what the Clippers will be. We don't know where the Lakers will be. Like, there's enough uncertainty to me in the West for me not to tell you that's a championship roster, but to tell you, damn it, that's a pretty good starting 5. And I think if all healthy, could push a lot of teams to, a breaking point or, go further than we think.
Yeah, and I think you're in a position, and we've talked about this a ton, right? The idea of the Blazers, they're trying to get better this year, but the goal isn't to be a title contending team. Like, listen, if they stumble into a title contending team this offseason, great. But everybody's approaching this with the idea of, we'll be a title contending team hopefully in 18 months. That's what they're hoping for. And so you do that by getting these pieces now and then figuring out the next steps as you get into another MLE, and as you get into another trade window, and as you get into another offseason with potentially new ownership and how much that changes the landscape. Aussie Blazer at @OzGuy_Blazers. Do you think there will be any changes to Chauncey's bench for next season? Chauncey had a fairly inexperienced coaching staff outside of Brooks. I believe that they're going to try to make some changes there, but I do know that a lot of their young assistants, like Anisha Curry, have great relationships with these players right now, particularly the younger guys, and Anthony Simons and Nasir Little, Trenton Watford, Greg Brown. Like, it'll be interesting to see. I want to say and I want to believe that they're going to try and get one more veteran assistant head coach to change some things around.
Any ideas?
Not yet. Still waiting to see who gets a job and who doesn't. Real quick, for those that don't know, Quinn Snyder has decided to leave Utah, as I understand it. Had a lot to do with not getting the control that he wanted, because the Utah Jazz also had a change in ownership after Dennis Lindsey left as a GM.
Also, Danny Ainge is there, and he's like, "Oh, you want control? Piss off."
Yeah, that's kind of how that ultimately went down. Is that Danny Ainge wasn't going to relinquish control, and Ryan Smith decided that Ainge, who he brought in to have control, and Quinn was like, "Yeah, you know what? If we're gonna, I'm gonna have a team that I can't decide how it builds, at least have some input on that, or more input than I currently have, then I'm out." And I think he definitely has an opportunity to be that kind of guy. I think he's earned that cachet to at least have some pretty strong feedback. As I understand it, Rudy Gobert is officially on the trade block behind the scenes. Donovan Mitchell will be there at least one more year. So it's going to be interesting to kind of see how that shakes out. Listen, I know the tweet that came out earlier definitely sounded like CAA, his agency, soft launching a trade request. What was it? Unnerved. Donovan Mitchell's unnerved by the situation.
Unnerved and refocusing his life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, bro, when you're going to those territory, I am all ready for you in about a week to say, I don't want to play in Utah anymore. I'm tired of being in Salt Lake City.
I will say this. I was told about a week ago that Mitchell was going to stay.
Well, it's the NBA.
Ladies and gentlemen, things can change quickly.
Yes,
DeAndre
they
Ayton,
can.
DeAndre Ayton, everybody was assured that DeAndre Ayton was returning to the Suns, and I said,
Why would you turn down the chance to pay him less money? It just didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to be there. So those things happen. The same thing with OG Anunoby. I will say this. The Portland Trailblazers hosted a workout today for Ben Mathurin alone. I and other Portland media members showed up at the practice facility, and we were turned away.
How was it?
We were turned away.
So you didn't get to speak with Ben Mathurin?
No.
All right.
The media staff of the Trailblazers did not know. And
they didn't know he was going to tell you to piss off?
No. So I imagine
a lot of egg on the face for them.
I would imagine that this came about as part of a request from Mathurin's agency.
I would tell you right now, I hope every single media member, including yourself, sends a very strongly worded letter to those reps at the Portland Trailblazers. You do not invite people in to not be able to speak to the one goddamn guy that's at the workout.
As I understand it,
that is a waste of everybody's time.
It was, but we all went and got lunch, so it's okay.
You all had lunch?
No,
like all of you?
No, just a couple of us. But the idea
who sat at the cool table?
There was only one table, so there's not a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, there's like, you could say there might be two different groups. I don't know. I'm always curious.
The old media room definitely had two different tables. That's for sure.
Shit, I never ate in there. I was always, I knew where I was in the media landscape. I took my food and I looked like a beat dog, and I walked out with my head down and I went and ate outside.
Just went all the way up.
I sat in like section 112 in a seat by myself eating my lone hot dog. I'm like, I'm all alone. All the writers. It's so clicky. It's like
high school.
Are you a scribe? Are you a scribe? Oh, we're scribes. We sit together.
There's definitely a little bit of that. Dick Burns, great name. Dick Burns Jr. Would Nick Batum really be open to a PDX return given how his first tenure ended? So
that is a great name.
It's a great name. I hope it's not made up.
Does it though?
But would Nick Batum be open to a PDX return given how his first tenure ended? There's some truth to how that first tenure ended. It wasn't great. As I understand it, Neil was not the biggest fan of Nick Batum. Nick Batum was not the biggest fan of Neil. But I tell you who is one of Nick Batum's biggest fans. Damian Lamont Ollie Lillard. Loves himself some Nick Batum. I've been told one of his favorite teammates of all time. The Blazers made an offer to Nick Batum, and I think they did it at the behest of Damian Lillard, much like they made an offer for JaVale McGee in free agency. He took less money to go to the Clippers, I would imagine, because of who was in charge at the time. Would Nick Batum be open to coming back to Portland now? I would imagine at least a little bit.
I can't remember where I heard this from, so apologies, because I hate being the guy that just blurts stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds like I'm making it up, but I want to say I heard it either on NBA TV or somebody in the media said something to the effect of, Nick, if he can control it, will be back in the Clippers. He likes playing in LA.
Mm-hmm.
He likes playing with those guys. He feels like they kind of know what his role is, and he wants to play where he feels comfortable. And that's definitely a place that he's done rather well, considering everybody said he was literally the worst player in the NBA statistically in some of the advanced metrics. He's fit in quite nice and been a pretty good piece for a team that, unfortunately for them, their superstars has just been injured.
Yeah, they've had piles of injuries. We'll get out of here pretty quick because I know you've got to take care of some stuff. Keegan Spenlove, at Keegan Spenlove. Any potential picks in the lottery that, for whatever reason, you would want the Blazers to avoid like the plague? Is there anybody around the 7 region, or even if they trade it back, say to 7, 10, 12, or something like that, where you're like, well, hell no?
Well, let me just quickly, I'll add to this, okay? I also want to add a question that was asked, and we'll kind of pile it in because it makes sense. Somebody had said, who is your pie in the sky? You reach for them, they can hit. I think it was a Dyson Daniels related question. I'm going to tell you, as a non-draft analyst, a guy who doesn't go to the combine, a guy who doesn't spend hours of his days breaking down college or G League film, nobody knows who is going to reach their potential in this draft.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows who is the guy to swing for the moon for. Okay? A lot of this is opinion-based, conjecture based on talking to certain people in the league, and also just forming your own opinion. It's not to discredit the hard work these guys do. They work their asses off. I've seen it. I know it. But it's to the people that are like, I've read a lot about Dyson Daniels. I think we should swing for the moon on Dyson. You don't know. you're guessing. You're doing everything everybody else is doing. You're guessing because we don't know how the fit's going to be, the organization, developmental program. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. I don't know if Dyson Daniels is your pie in the sky, you swing for the fences guy in this draft. He might be, or he might be a significantly worse version of Ben Simmons, which right now Ben Simmons isn't looked upon as particularly a great piece.
Sure.
That being said, if there's a dude that I'm willing to roll it with, this is like kind of throwing my 2 cents in there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very interested in AJ Griffin. And I know that goes against a lot of conventional wisdom, given where he is slated on a lot of mocks, but he is 6'7".
Raphael loves him.
Right. Talking to Raphael kind of helps, but he's 6'7", and I know what his knocks are. Slow-footed, wasn't the most aggressive player on that Duke roster. Hell, in a lot of instances, wasn't even maybe top 3. But he's, 19 years old?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I like the idea of getting a guy like that and putting him in this situation where he's going to be looked at as a 3 or a 4 option, maybe a 5, depending on who's here, and letting him work through it and figure that out. And I'm particularly saying this because maybe you go get your Andrew Wiggins, a guy who was slated number 1, wasn't a franchise guy, not a 2, hell, sometimes not even a 3.
But a damn good player in a couple years.
But a damn good player and a really good piece for a good team.
Let's not get it twisted. Andrew Wiggins was an all-star because the Warriors were very good, but also just
He deserved it.
He did deserve it. Like, he was a very good player. He has become a plus defender. He's a guy who gets downhill and gives them rim pressure. He went to what we call Warriors University and learned how to play the bleeping game.
Yes, he did.
And that's, again, you're looking at things and going, well, it kind of makes sense. He started Minnesota, which is, basketball hell. Like, nobody goes there and gets better. That's been kind of their problem. Now, has that changed with new ownership and changing things and how they go about stuff? Possibly. But in the past, no. And I think that's part of, again, a credit to the Warriors. I will say that the player that I do not want to touch, and this is not as much a shot at him as much as I don't, there's something about him that it's not for me. It's Johnny Davis. Loved him in college. But there's something about his game that I look at and I go, I don't know, man. Like,
really?
Just the way that he moves, like, I just don't trust it. And I know that he played with some injuries, and I know he kind of had to battle through some stuff, but he's super competitive, a bit of a dog, but I'm just like, there's something there that I don't trust. And the other one's Jalen Duren. Those are the two guys in the lottery that I want to stay away from the most.
Yeah, the Duren one's interesting to me about why so many people are already kind of out on, considering
how young he is. And
he's the youngest player in the draft, right?
So I get it. I just look at it and I go, what is the best case scenario for Jalen Duren? High-end DeAndre Jordan, which is a good player. Do the Blazers need to wait? Because let's be honest, it takes centers about 4 years to figure stuff out. Do the Blazers want to wait 4 years to see a guy turn into high-end DeAndre Jordan?
Probably. I don't know. He'd be 22.
Again, it's not necessarily a bad thing.
At 4 years sounds like a long time, and it kind of is. But like, he's also like going to be 22 years old in 4 years, which is insane to think about.
Yeah, and again, it's not that I think he's a bad player. I just think the development curve, when he's actually going to figure stuff out, because bigs take longer than anybody right now.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes sense for this team. And I don't see the tools there that turns him into a top 3, top 5 center. If there were additional skill sets or tools there, you could talk me into it. I just don't see the other stuff that was enough to get him up there.
I think Chet's going to be a good player. I'm not all the way on Chet the way other people are. I don't view him that way. And I'll give you one because I kind of went the other way with the question because I had that big rant about draft picks. I like them swinging for AJ. I'll give you the one to answer the original question. I'm going to trust my guy, Zach Kroll, who I work with at the BetQL Network. Mm-hmm. He probably watches during the season more college basketball than anybody else I actually personally know. Like, this dude's watching all of these games. He is not particularly in love with Jaden Ivey. And I know that's a very hot take right now, considering how much he's skyrocketing.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in, and I'm going to old takes expose myself, and I'm going to say right now, no, I don't want to swing for the fences on Jaden Ivey. I'm not particularly that great on him, and we'll see how stupid I look in about 8 months.
Yeah, I think if any player in this draft is going to be a rookie of the year outside the bigs, it's going to be him. Because he's going to be in the position, much like Donovan Mitchell was in his rookie year. You're like, oh, yeah, shit, this guy can play. Like, I think it was December. Everybody's like, oh, my goodness, this guy's good. Like, it was very apparent. It wasn't like the rookie class this year, as good as it was between Cade and Scotty and Evan, where you're looking at, like, these are good players.
Right.
Donovan Mitchell come December, everybody was like, oh, he's one of those guys.
Yeah.
I think of any of these players right now, I think Jaden Ivey's the most likely to hit that, but I also see where you could see him falling short because he's not a true point guard. He's a combo guard, score first kind of guard. It's very interesting to see how that, like, where he ends up landing on that scale.
I also hope for his sake he doesn't go to Sacramento. Like, of all the teams in the league,
Then that's where it sounds like he's going to end up.
brother, I don't know if there is a team to be on worse than Sacramento, and I hate Oklahoma City. Like, actually, I don't like the city. It's awful. I've been there. But Sacramento is a franchise I just have no trust or faith in. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, and there's a good reason for that. We'll get on this last one. We'll get out of here. OG Anunoby rumors. We talked about it a little bit. They're just ramping up. They're getting louder and louder and louder and louder. Watching Toronto fans go through it this last week has been a blast. The Masai.
You are a sick son of a bitch.
Listen, man. There's a reason why I've been talking about this since mid-March. It has not been something that I was just pulling out of thin air. I've heard a ton around it for a long time, and when you hear this much around something, there's enough smoke to say that there's a fire over the hills. Whether or not that manifests itself in a trade request, I don't know, but I would say that we're closer to that than not. If I had to put money down on it, I would say it's a coin toss that gets done. That's how much more confident.
Like,
I am
he gets done to Portland, or he gets traded.
Then he gets done to Portland.
You're more confident that he's traded to Portland than not?
Yes. If he's traded, I think the most likely landing place for him is Portland. Tell me, Brandon, does his agency?
What would it take to get him? Show me that trade package. 7.
And one of either Hart or Little.
You don't think they want both?
They can't have both.
Okay.
And I think it's going to be an interesting spot to see where that looks like. People sitting there saying, "Well, that doesn't sound like enough." I mean, I've heard national people like a sign and trade with Yusuf Nurkic and Josh Hart is enough to get DeAndre Ayton. John Hollinger said that the other day with Nate Duncan. I've heard other national people say for OG 7 is enough.
Just the pick by itself.
So
you avoid the contract extension stuff. You continue this build up with young talent. Get a cohesive core together.
And as good as the Raptors have drafted.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So
yeah, they'd probably end up selecting the guy that ends up hitting
borderline rookie of the year again. Right,
and we would go, OG's our third option. We traded that for that guy. You know what I mean? We'd find a way to already be miserable.
So it's just an interesting place. The Portland Trailblazers are going to be on the clock in 18 days. 18 days. A little bit more than 2 weeks, a little less than 3 weeks, however you want to.
It's wild how quick it's coming.
It's coming up quick. So just as a heads up, folks, we will have a live watch party with Watch Playback. It will be open. It will be public. We will be going that night. Now, whether or not, depending on how things go and what the timing looks like, we may do the show, and as soon as the draft wraps, I may hop in the car and drive down to the practice facility for questions.
Presser?
Yeah, for the presser, where I got to see kind of how timing lines up. They usually do it, I think, about an hour after the draft.
There's usually
there's usually a gap.
I went to that one the year they took Nolan Smith, and boy, talk about a boring ass place to watch a draft. Oh my God. It's media guys giving their hottest goddamn takes. Like, hey, can you fire off this tweet? I'm going to fire off this tweet. And then you're just kind of sitting in the big gym watching the draft, and then you're moseying on over like a herd of elephants.
So I'm going to try to avoid that part of it and then go to the presser afterwards. And I think that's the way we're going to shape this up.
Let's do this. I honestly, if we're doing the live watch party, Why not do the top 15 picks and then we'll cut it and then you can just drive over.
Bail out of there. Okay.
We don't need to watch the whole first round. If Portland trades the pick, cool. If they draft it, it's at 7. That's a lot of time for reaction.
And not only that, we should hear how things are escalating as it goes for that.
Yes. If anything, we'd have a follow-up pod the next day.
Yeah. So, or I'll just grab my phone and go live from there.
Shit, if you don't mind being the guy in the corner, making fun of Joe Cronin's decisions.
We're going to give Joe his chances. We're going to give him his opportunities.
No, I know. I'm actually really excited to see what happens.
Yeah, so am I. Thank you all for being here. Brandon's got to get going. I told him we'd get him out of here sooner, and I just looked at the clock, and I'm an idiot, and I went way longer than I should have, and he didn't say anything.
My wife goes, I know how many times you've done these podcasts. You're not getting out when you said you need to get out. And I said, no, that'll happen. He's like, no way, it will. I'm like, great. Awesome.
Sorry. So I'm sorry. Blame me.
It's okay.
Like, rate, review, subscribe. Help us grow the show. You can find us on social media at Danny Marang, at Brandon Sprague, like it says on the screen, and at Jacked Ramsays. As you can tell, we have a new kind of setup here. So tell me if you like it. Tell me what you don't like. I'm always open to interpretations, trying to clean things up and give
I like
a
the
little more
rundown
information.
sheet right here.
Yeah.
I like this rundown sheet.
Other side for you. Other side for you.
I like this rundown sheet.
There you
I'm
go.
a big fan of
There
this
we go.
rundown sheet.
Just to kind of give you guys an idea of where things are sitting at. And again, we will have the live watch party. I am trying to book a few more guests before the NBA draft, and then not only draft, but just kind of where we might or what players we might see. And remember, for everybody who doesn't know this, the Blazers cannot trade their pick this season until draft night. Because of the step-in rule. They cannot do that. So any moves that are going to happen that night. That's why we're doing the coverage the way we're doing it. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Help us grow the show. Again, if you want or if you can, please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. 5-star, 1-star, whatever you're feeling like. We prefer the 5-star, but 1-stars are fine too, as long as you leave us a review. Other than that, I think we can get out of here, Sprague. You got anything?
No, I think we covered a lot of ground here. And if anything pops up, we'll get back to it. And just check at Jacked Ramsays and at Danny Marang and my handle at Brandon Sprague. Just check them all, and we'll give you all the info for the future pods.
And if you're still watching or listening here, the Golden State Warriors are going to win Game 2 handily.
Yeah. Oh, they just obliterated them.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Second half.
It's amazing what happens when the Celtics don't hit 7 straight threes in the fourth quarter.
Yes. Also, it just kind of felt like this series is going to go deeper, I think, than 4 or 5.
So it'll be interesting. We will catch you guys all later. We will go live at least on Thursday. We might go live a little bit sooner if we have any interesting things pop up. Otherwise, thank you all so very much. We appreciate you. We love you. And this is going to be fun, folks. We got a little bit more than 2 weeks, and it's going to be busy. I'm literally like giddy underneath right now. I'm just like, all right, let's do a little because this is what's going to set the franchise up or set the franchise back.
Yeah, there's a lot of change coming. There's no doubt.
So, again, thank you all. We love you. Appreciate you. You can find us on social media at Danny Marang, at Brandon Sprague, at Jacked Ramsays. Email the show, jackedramsays@gmail.com. Other than that, everybody have a wonderful night. Enjoy the Boston Celtics losing, not so much the Warriors winning, because we hate both those teams. At least I do. So, until next time, for Brandon, I'm Danny. Take care. Talk soon.